Hi everybody, here we are in week 2. Notice the different background to show that it's week 2 and not week 1. So last week we looked at some really basic PHP stuff. We got you writing a Hello World program, and hopefully by the end of it you were creating PHP pages that would look different each time they were loaded. So for example, the Dice app, if you got that far, used random numbers to make a page that, even though every time you loaded it, had slightly different content. That's what PHP is all about. That's what server-side scripting is all about. It's about custom pages, pages that look different at different times or look different for different users. What we're going to do now, though, is we are going to expand that so that we can get some input into our PHP programs. So far, we haven't been able to get any information from the user and incorporate that into the pages. What we're going to focus on here is we're going to focus on the old input processing output paradigm. So that paradigm means, overall kind of style of programming or frame of programming. And you would have, way back in Python, you might have been introduced to this term: programs that have a dialogue with the user, collect some information, maybe 2 numbers to add, then they do some processing, they add the 2 numbers, and then they do some output. They output the result of adding 2 numbers. So we're going to create IPO programs, input processing output programs, in PHP. But with PHP, it's going to require a bit more kind of infrastructure, and it's going to require 2 files. So we're going to do the input using HTML forms. So the first file is going to be a form. It's going to be a file of type HTML. It could be a PHP file, but we won't need any code in it. So we'll just make it an HTML file. And then the processing and the output will be done in a PHP file, a PHP program. So the form will will collect the input from the user, will send that over to the PHP program, which will process it and display the result. Okay, so in this video, we're just going to look at forms. Now, I'm really hoping that a lot of this is going to be review, so you may be able to skip over it quickly. You can also review things on on W3 Schools in the Learn HTML section. You can review forms there. But I'm going to try and get the really important information out in the very beginning, and then we'll do a little bit more information towards the end. So in the first 10 minutes, we should see everything. Okay, so if we take a look at the screen here, over in modules, we are in module 1 here. So you should have the module 1 guide hopefully up or printed. There's some extra info here on forms that introduces things that are not officially kind of part of the main flow. So if you want to do forms that have radio buttons and drop down lists and things like that, there's some extra info there. You can also go to W3 Schools and get that. And we're going to be looking at the code and the exercises. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get the code by clicking on it here and then downloading. And I'm going to copy it to my desktop, which probably still already has it on there. So let's pretend I didn't have that there. I'm just going to copy out of the zip file onto my desktop. I need 2 things here eventually, but for this video I'm going to use template.html. You could use template.php for this, but if there's not going to be any PHP code in the file, you're better off making it an HTML file. The reason being that the server, if it sees .php, will start up the PHP interpreter and will run the PHP interpreter on the file. So that's a waste of resources if you know there's no PHP in there. So we're going to use template.html. I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to move it over to my htdocs folder, which I have put here. So this is inside Windows XAMPP htdocs. I'll create a new folder in here. This is just to get things started. A folder, and I will call it form, like that. And I'm going to go in there and I'm going to paste into here. Boom. So template.html, I'm going to rename that to form.html, and then I'm going to right click, and because I have VS Code installed, hopefully you'll see this too, I can just open it with VS Code like that. So this is the HTML template. It's the same as the PHP template, except there are no PHP tags in it. It just has a div here that says put some content here. Now, to make sure that I've got my whole setup going so that I can work on this, I have to start up XAMPP, So I put XAMPP as a quick launch icon down here. I need to start Apache. I note my port number here is 8080. Yours might not be the same, it might be different. And I'm going to go over here and go to localhost 8080 / the folder I just created. So localhost colon 8080 tells me to go to the address 127, here it is here, .0.0.1, and to the port 8080, which is the one that matches the XAMPP, what XAMPP was telling me. And that will take me to the htdocs folder. So from there, I want to go to form. And here's the folder that I'm in right now. So if I click form, it just says put some content here. And I'm going to go view page source, right click view page source. So this is the raw output. I guess this isn't a PHP program, so we won't really have to look at this very much, because the raw output here of my file should be exactly the same as what I typed over here. So let's put these two things side by side. And so for this, for once, we don't actually have to worry about looking at view page source, since they're never going to be different, because this is not PHP. Okay, so I'm going to launch into what I hope, as like I said, what I hope is at least partially review. We want to put a form in this. So the idea is to have a page that, maybe greets the user, tells the user what's going on, and then gives them a form to fill in for some task. So the most basic element you need for a form is the form element itself. So this should enclose all of your input elements, and then your input elements are like this. They need to have a type at least, and for now, nothing else. Like that. Okay, so I'm going to use two input elements, type text and type submit, inside my form element, and that gets me this. Okay, so not very much styling. I can type in here, and I can hit submit, which you'll notice actually what it does is it reloads this page, and notice the question mark here on the file. I'll explain that in a moment. Okay, so this is a basic form. You can style forms in CSS. I'll talk a bit about that later. But what we're mostly going to use forms for in PHP is to send information to another place. So we have to do a couple of things to configure this form so that it sends whatever I type here to a PHP program. The first thing I have to do is I have to add an attribute to the form item itself to tell it where to send the information. Okay, so I'm going to go form action equals results.php. We'll just call it that. Now that file doesn't exist yet, but what this does is it configures the form. I'm going to save this with Control S, reload the form over here. It configures the form so that when I now hit submit, the submit button, or if I hit enter in here, enter inside a text box, either one of those will trigger a submit event. It will now not reload the page, but it will go to result.php. And we get object not found, error 404, and so on, because that page doesn't exist yet. But we don't care about that. We're just doing the form right now. Okay, so that's one thing that we have to do. The second thing that we have to do is, right now it's going to this page, but it's not sending any information. It's not sending any of the information that I typed. In order to get it to send the information, I have to name my inputs. Okay? So I got to give this a name. Let's just call it user input. Just call it user input. Okay. So that's you should give these more meaningful names when you have more fully featured forms. But by giving this a name now, you'll notice something different. If I type something here, hello, and I submit it, if you take a look up at the URL, you can see user input equals hello, and then these percent codes. Those are percent codes for the exclamation mark. They've been converted to ASCII codes. The exclamation mark is, I believe, is ASCII code 33. And so this is a hexadecimal number, 21. So 2 times 16 is 32, plus 1 is 33. So you'll see that sometimes it converts the codes. But what this is this is called a get parameter. Okay, so this is a parameter that's been sent because I named this element. So any named element inside the form will get sent as a parameter. There is another place to see this information as well. I'm going to introduce to you guys the developer tools. So I'm using Chrome. Most browsers have these tools, but you can, I think if you go here, go more tools, developer tools, you'll see the shortcut is Control-Shift-I. On a lot of computers, it's F12. I'm using F12 here. And what this takes you to is a view of the current page. So you can actually see this is a web page that says object not found. You can view the CSS that's in play. You can click on these various items to see the elements over here. But what we're most interested in here is the network tab. I'm going to reload this. So if we go over to the network tab, what it's showing me here is that, let me reload that again, is that the request was for result.php with this user input parameter. And the status was 404, so it came back with page not found. The server replied with page not found. If you click here, though, you can actually see these are the headers that were sent. So this was the URL that was requested. The request method was get. We'll talk more about that in a minute. The result code and so on. And what you want to look at, so you can see the HTTP request that was sent and the HTTP response. I'm going to ignore the response headers. Look at the request headers. If we scroll down to the bottom, oh, sorry, it's not in request headers, it's in query string parameters. So there they are. You can see the parameter that was sent. So this is the parameter that it received. It received a parameter called user input, and this was its content. And this is what it looks like up here as a get parameter. It appears this way. Okay, so this is sending information to the next page, which doesn't exist yet. If I add a second user input here, so let's go type equals, let's use a different type this one. You can see this time, you can see that I'm getting a lot of help here for all the different types that I can put here. Let's say number, and we're going to name this user, let's call this username and user age. How about that? Username and user age. And we'll even put a thing here saying enter your name and age. And what the heck, let's use some more stuff here. Let's put placeholders here. Placeholder equals name and placeholder, oh, placeholder's not going to work here, I don't think. I think placeholder works on text boxes but not on number boxes. Let's take a look. I'm just going to leave that open here. Enter your name and age. Oh no, it does allow a placeholder. So the placeholders give you this grayed out text that disappears when you type. So I am Sam and I am 50. There you go. Now you know how old I am. Notice that when I change type to number, it changes the way, and this is totally browser dependent, but these different types here change the way the form element is shown to the user. So I get a spinner here that I can use. And you'll notice that I can spin it all the way down to negative ages if I want. It won't allow me to enter text. So if I wanted to prevent that, there are other parameters I can use. I could say minimum number is 1, like that. So now if I reload this, it's not going to let me go lower than 1. And if I enter -4 and try to submit, it's going to give me an error message. So you can control the user a little bit using these forms. But let me change this back to Sam and 50. And now that I submit this, over here again, the username, the result was 404. That's why it's showing up in red. But we can take a look at the query string parameters. The Apache server received 2 parameters, username and user age, Sam and 50. And here they are up here. So question mark, username equals Sam, ampersand, user age equals 50. This is kind of cool because I can, when I'm testing my program, I don't have to go through my form. I can actually change things up here. So if I say, let's make myself 23 again, and you click here, you'll see that now it's receiving those parameters. So you can type data that's being sent to the user directly into the query string here. Okay, let's go take a look at where we're at in the guide here. So I started with this little form here, and I'm reviewing a bunch of other values you can put for type that you might want to take a look at. So password, number and range, URL and email. What all these things do is they, in some cases, depending on the browser, change the way the element looks and the way it behaves. Color is pretty cool. That pops up a whole little color chooser for you. And it also does it forces some checking. So if you say type equals email and the user types something that's not an email address, it'll flag that and it won't allow the submission. The browser won't allow the submission until they get that right. Okay, and then there's some attributes: placeholder, size, maximum, minimum, and step for numbers and dates and times. Yeah, you can use date and time as well here. Those will pop up little calendar choosers and stuff for you. So that's, I'll let you guys review that on your own. But that's the basics of form elements. Going to ignore this CSS stuff here. This is what I just covered. You need an action and you need a name on the parameters in order to send them. Oh, there's also this required thing here, which is kind of cool. Let me show you how that works. If I go back here and I say the name is required, like that, so I just type in that, that's it's what do you call it? An attribute without without a value attached to it. So I'm going to reload this. If I try to submit now, whoops, I think I need to save this. Notice it's not saved. Now it's saved. Reload. Try to submit. It says please fill out this field, so it won't let me proceed until I put something here. Age, even though there was a minimum of 1, it did allow me to submit the age with nothing in it. So you'll see here user age equals, and then there's nothing there. And over here you'll see it got 2 parameters, username and user age, but there was nothing in user age. Where are we over here? Right here. And here it explains the anatomy of the URL here. This is the address. The question mark means that's the end of the address and the beginning of the data. And then you can have any number of things separated by an ampersand character here. Its parameter name equals parameter value. Okay, and you can see them in the network tab as well. Now the other thing I wanted to talk to you about, and then I'll go back and we'll quickly look at some CSS, is get versus post. So by default, there are 2 ways to send data. You can send get parameters, and that's what we've been doing. So when I type, a number here and hit send, you'll see over here request method get. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit more when we get to databases, especially about the difference between get and post. But for now, the main difference is whether or not the parameters are sent as part of the request header in the URL, so they appear here, or whether they're sent as part of the body. So get parameters will always appear up here. So they're query string parameters, so they'll appear in the query string parameters section here. If I change this method, so right now the default method is get, so this is the same as putting method equals get here, like that. So inside the form element is where I specify that. So if I reload here, there we go. You can see that they're being sent as get parameters. But if I change that to post, so save that, go back and reload over here. Now it's the same form, but it's going to send them, and it's going to send the same parameters, username and user age, because those are the names I gave to my elements. But when I submit, you will not see the elements here. You won't see the data up here. If you want to view the data, you'll see down here it's post is the method of the request, and the form data is here. So if you're using post, you have to look inside the network tab and inside the initial query to see username and user age here. So it's sending the exact same parameters, but it's sending them in the body of the request. So if you think of the request that the user is sending, the HTTP request they're sending to the server as an email, it's got header information and it's got a body. Usually the body is empty, but if there are post parameters, they appear in the body. Okay, so that's the difference between get and post. That's really all you need to know right now. We're going to get you to do some exercises where you generate some forms, and then move on quickly to the PHP program that's going to receive this information on the other end. So in the next video, I'll write that. So yes, let's take a look at the Module 1 exercises. We are now in exercises for parts 3 and 4. So both 1 and 2 here have you create an HTML form in part A, and then do something to receive the data in part B. This one here builds on the app that I had you build in exercise 1 of the previous section, which is the one where it goes like 2, 4, 6, 8 in a UL element, in an unordered list element, all the way up to 1,000 or whatever. This is a new one, a tip calculator. So it describes the fields that I want to put here, and it gives you some hints about what types and so on to use. And don't forget to name all. So I want you to try A and maybe B and maybe A of part 2 as well. Make both of these forms or pick one that looks interesting to you and create that form and just have it sending to some other, give it any file name you want, result.php or something like that, and get that going. And try and make it look nice as well. So that brings me to the part about making things look nice. You can, of course, style these things. This is just the default style. Notice that they are side by side here. I can write some style rules if I want, either in a separate place or just to keep things simple, I'm going to put them inside a style element in the header here. So I could say I want all my input, I can style all my input elements at once like this if I want. I could say display block. So right now they're in line, so they go next to each other. Maybe I want them on top of each other. And I don't know, how about width 100%, something like that. See what that does. Reload. And now I have my form elements that look like that. I might also change my box sizing. I don't know if you've seen this parameter before. Border box. Yeah, so what that's done is, without this, here, let me show you. If I go and inspect one of these elements here, I get into this view over here. I can turn off this property. So you see what it does? Box sizing border box means that when you set the width, it includes padding and and border as well. So it's a good thing to do. It gives me a kind of a nicer thing over here. So this form is beginning to look a little bit more friendly. For example, for a mobile user, where you want the form elements to fit on the screen. Styling the buttons to make them look nicer is a bit tricky. A lot of people for forms, they use frameworks like Bootstrap and stuff like that, which predefined classes that'll do things for you. But I did want to show you, you can give elements IDs and classes and so on, but there's also a type selector. So doing this says, or this is actually an attribute selector. So you put the square brackets and you put the attribute and the value. So for any input element with type equals text, let's say font size is going to be 30 pixels. I'll make it really big just to show the difference. So my name now is going to be really big, Sam Scott, and my age will be small. Okay, so there's you can also set background colors, borders, and so on. You know, feel free to go nuts and figure that out. You'll see that the submit button here has a hover style on it. So if I wanted to change the submit button, I could do like background color sky blue or something like that. Reload that. But now it doesn't look as much like a button anymore. Notice there are some border effects here as well. When I hover over it, it doesn't do much. I could do something like this, type equals submit, hover, background color, about royal blue, and let's go color white. I don't know, this isn't going to be the greatest looking button, but when I mouse over it, it goes like that. So it looks like something I can submit. Okay, so I'll let you guys explore that on your own. This is not a course in making things look good, but it is going to be a requirement of the assignments that you at least make an effort to try and make things look good. Okay, so do your best, do a little bit of CSS to try and make things look a little bit better than just the default styles. You know, just changing fonts to sans serif fonts like Arial and stuff, and changing sizes a little bit often goes a long way just to make things look a little bit more contemporary and a little bit more you know, modern. Anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Please go and try 1A and 2A in parts 3 and 4 exercises. These two exercises right here. Oh, and there is this module, extra forms info. Please do go over the stuff that's in the guide, because I may have skipped over a few of the details. And if you want even more sophisticated stuff, there's module 1 extra info here, but that's a little bit optional. So we're just looking for 1A and 2A. All right. See you in the next video.